Okay, negative interest rates. What are they? Negative interest rate is essentially when a financial institution charges you money to store your money. Um, Typically, people are used to this concept where if you go deposit cash into a bank, you would make a return on your money because that bank would in turn lend your money out. Um, and they do that at an interest rate. A negative interest rate is where if somebody were to take their money to a financial institution, the bank would charge them to store it for them. Um, that carries with it a couple of problems. But that's basically what a negative interest rate is. A couple things I wanted to hit. One, there is an injustice there. Two, what are the stories that we are told? And then three, what are the stories that we ultimately believe? Um, so the injustice stems from the fact that like if you have a closed system of money where there's no possibility of injections of cash injections into the system, then capital is a finite resource, and as population grows and as ingenuity happens and as new technology comes along, uh, that money is lent. More people need it. More people want it to open businesses, to facilitate transactions. And because you have a fixed supply, the supply is fixed. And then the people who want that supply is growing. So the people who want the supply is fixed. So the supply is fixed, demand is growing. So price value should go up. What is strange about the manipulation of interest rates is it's done by a third party, a Federal Reserve, who's seemingly disconnected from the market. And then at the same time, negative interest rates penalize those people who have been fiscally responsible, quote unquote, these virtuous life choices. Live on less than you make, save, invest, make sure you, a lot of times those people have a community. Make sure that you give. A lot of people who are fiscally responsible generally tithe or give of their money to some philanthropical endeavor, and those things that are virtuous. So you try to be small, stay small, don't take more than you need, don't hoard. Physical things like toilet paper. Recently, people were just hoarding toilet paper. I read a story where a guy had $10,000 worth of toilet paper and he couldn't return it. Not that stuff, but like you don't take more than you need for food, or you clean your plate, or you're very, very efficient with your utilities at your house. You're not running your AC during the day. You turn your water off when you brush your teeth, and so on and so. A lifetime of those choices have produced this wealth that a lot of people have. And then negative interest rate just comes along and says, okay, well, then now that you have it, we need it as a system, so we're going to penalize you. And what's really strange about that is it's seemingly there's no end to the amount of money that can be created. So I still salute the people who have lived a life that way and created wealth, but there's an injustice there that they're told that they're climbing the mountain and that they're going to be set. And at the same time, their value of the thing that they have worked towards starts to get debased. Now, that brings up a question, what are you working for, of course, and that's where I feel like most people miss the mark. Every job you do, whether big or small, is good. All work is good. The problem I've struggled with in my life, and I think most people do struggle with, is they don't going to do anything unless it pays. I think that's a wrong way to look at work for this particular reason. If you are a person who saved their money and now you're up, looking down the barrel of a negative interest rate, how is it that you're going to ever get away from that? You really can't. Cash almost doesn't exist anymore. Really nobody has gold, and if you do have it, you can't go transact with it. Bitcoin is pretty cool. It's interesting, but it's not widely accepted. You're really stuck in this position where, okay, you're not going to really have a choice but to take it on the chin with negative interest rates. And I think to that person, the system, and this is what people will say, okay, well, the majority trumps the minority. And I think that's a really slippery slope to start to go down because, okay, well, where do you draw the line there? And I get what people will say. This won't happen all at once. It'll probably affect the large earners and high net worth value individuals. But the thing is, it's really hard to walk this stuff back. And so once you start to devalue a currency, there really is there's no check against the devaluation as long as inflation continues to happen. I mean, the fact that deflation started happening recently, where you could almost buy it. I mean, 3 months ago, a barrel of oil was $70, and then within like a month, you could buy 10 barrels of oil for that same price. Shows you the value of a dollar relative to oil, but now it's head the other way. Oil prices back in the mid 30s. Those people that saved for the briefest moments were like, man, my dollars I have are really valuable. But the problem is, there is a problem that exists. That problem is debt. As the debt burden grows, if you're not devaluing the currency tomorrow to pay for that debt today, all those debts get real expensive really fast because they're all done in dollars. And so as a currency deflates, all of the value of the debt, it just becomes so astronomically expensive. So said another way, if you tried to raise interest rates, for example, it would cause deflation. You essentially have a problem with, how do you ever pay all this debt back in the first place? Similarly speaking, if the currency deflates based on money velocity or people's spending habits, for example, the negative interest rates are a way to encourage people to keep spending, keep the economic wheel churning. And I think that forces people into this thinking that, well, what's the point of efficient living? You wouldn't have any because you're not getting any reward. There's no monetary response to fiscally responsibly living, because you're not making a return on your money. Your choices aren't being rewarded financially. So there's no monetary incentive. That means there's no incentive. I think there's plenty of incentive to do it, but there's just no monetary incentive, which is, like I said earlier, a large driver to people's choices. So a couple things, the last two things I want to hit on is, which, by the way, is I think an injustice, is you start to think about the way the stories that people are told. And going to the second point, the stories people are told is work hard, invest, send your kids to a good school, keep your head down, go to the game on Saturday, go to church on Sunday, and you'll be okay. And what people are starting to realize is that's just not the case. You play by the people at the top play by a different set of rules than people at the bottom. I heard an interesting statistic where people who make over $100,000 a year, on average, give 1%, where people who make under like $40,000 a year give on average 4%. There's a reason why. Luxuries become, people start to think they're necessities, but also those people who make $100,000 a year can largely live these cloistered lives in these socioeconomic brackets that are away from any kind of real need, right? And as you go down the socioeconomic ladder, people start to have to be in community, and they need real help, and so the giving is not really an option. It's like Joe down the street's not going to be here tomorrow if I don't help him out. And so the story you're told, do all those things and you'll make it, are starting to have some holes in it. This idea that, you just work hard and knuckle up and work for 40 years is basically gone. I don't know it. I see very few guys, I'm 35, very few guys my age are at the same companies they started with. And with what's going on with layoffs and all this stuff right now, a lot of people might not make it. The job landscape is changing so fast, and your skills have to be constantly adapting in order to stay in the workforce, that you realize there's no pensions anywhere anymore. Almost exclusively, there's no pensions. There's no, they're cutting them left and right if you have one. I had one at BP when I was there for 6 years, and the minute they were on their way out anyway, and then they sold to Marathon, the place I was at, the refinery I was at, and the Marathon cut there was no pension at Marathon, and so the same thing exists everywhere. I'm not really sure what's going to happen to like teachers' pensions and police pensions and things like this, but I can't imagine they're very safe. On top of it, Social Security is, the people that I talk with, very few of them think that they're going to qualify or be able to have it in the end. So these stories that you're being told people are realizing that they don't really make any sense. And when push comes to shove, you're either going to get your currency devalued or you're going to be charged. Think about it. You're going to get your currency devalued if you try to do it, or you're going to be charged a negative interest rate in order to save your money, which is it's absurd if you really think about it. You're caught in a no-win situation. And so, what story do we believe? I think a lot of people are starting to be faced with this reality that the stories that they were told, you can't believe them. So where do you go? And I think what the world has to offer, I think Bitcoin is probably the most interesting because it really is a fixed money supply. But it doesn't mean I think world governments and financial institutions are going to get creative on how to institute something similar where Bitcoin might be around, but there's going to be something else in place. But the constant injection and expansion and contraction of the money supply really affects everyday people a lot. I mean, going to McDonald's for a Big Mac meal is like $8. I mean, I can remember as a kid, that's not even that, 20 years ago, working my weekend job, going next door to McDonald's and getting a Big Mac meal for like $4. And that's a real problem, given that minimum wage isn't keeping up, wages aren't rising, the wealth inequality continues to grow. It's a crazy time. So I'd be curious to know what you guys think. I think that personally, negative interest rates are sort of an indication that there's something really wrong in the financial institutions and the system that we currently have. And I'm just curious to see how this all plays out. Not scared nor worried, but just curious. Tell me what you guys think.